My name is Dave G, and we've got a really good friend of mine, Dr. Michelle McGrath, with us tonight. And you probably don't know much about the Entrepreneurship Educators Association. It's a brand new service from one of my companies called Startup Guides, and we're actually going through the process of determining, are we going to be a nonprofit or a C Corp? And so there's some interesting discussions there for the future. And it basically began as a Facebook group back in January. Wanted to help entrepreneurship educators around the world connect with each other, share ideas. And as of this morning, we have 480 teachers from around the world in our Facebook group. And that's evolved into a website where we're going to do teacher certifications, free teaching resources. We've got Planet Pitch, which I'm super excited about. It's an international social entrepreneurship pitch competition, and it'll be virtual. So high school students can enter on, let me get this website address, and teachers, I encourage you to go to this website address, myeea.org. You can find out all about the Entrepreneurship Educators Association. So one of the things our group members have asked for is two really big topics, important topics. So first of all, women in entrepreneurship. And the second one is social entrepreneurship. So, and women in entrepreneurship was the most popular category. So only appropriate that we start with the topic of women in entrepreneurship. Dr. Michelle McGrath, and she'll just go by Michelle, as a prolific speaker, a nationally renowned speaker, a lifelong educator, an author, an entrepreneur, what else? An educator, a student association executive, a principal, all sorts of things. But what we're going to do, I find one of the most effective way to do presentations like this is to actually have people tell their story. So I'm going to back out, and Michelle's going to share her story. We'll talk for about 15 minutes or so. Feel free to ask questions as we go. And then what we'll do at the end is we'll definitely answer questions. We are going to record this session, and then we'll edit it and put it on our YouTube channel. So Michelle, the stage is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Dave, for having me, and welcome to everyone. It's a little weird not being able to see everyone's face. I know Dave mentioned that, but I'll pretend there's a big crowd in front of me, so I'm talking genuinely to all of you. But like you said, I am a longtime educator. I've been in education, 29 years, long time. I was a teacher and then a principal, and then I led the third largest student leadership organization in the country, WSC, for almost a decade and a half. And then recently, now I run a coalition, a community coalition around alcohol and drug prevention. But in the process of all of that, also wrote a book and started my own business, Zenith, which I'll get to in a few minutes. But I'm going to start with the story. I would say Glennon Doyle is one of my favorite authors, and she says, a good day is a good day, but a bad day is a good story. And I remember probably now about 10 years ago, and I was in, I think a lot of the folks that are on this webinar tonight are educators or have been in a field where you're helping and you're serving a lot of people and encouraging them and inspiring them to do some wonderful things. And I was in that same boat as an administrator, but I was also going through a divorce at that time and had brought on living in my own house with my two kids. And I remember one day coming into my house and needing to go down and swap out the laundry in the basement, and found sewage had leaked in all over in my basement. And I remember going upstairs and didn't know what to do. And just to be honest, pretty defeated. I had all these things just on top of me, making things just, ugly in my life. And I remember I had a couple choices. And what I chose to do was flip the script, that ultimately I needed to start taking care of and really looking into how I could be fearless and how I could move forward and get to a life that I really felt fulfilled, because at that point I felt I was serving everyone else and not me. So that's when I went back for my doctorate, started writing my book, and then started making plans for starting my own business. And that's what I wanted to share with this group is I've had a lot of experience not only encouraging, inspiring young people to take risks and do really great things. And I could tell you stories from here until next week about all the really cool things they're doing. But this is more about my story, about how I finally said, you know what, I'm gonna take some risks and do some things for me. And I want to share those tidbits with you tonight. So I started the business Zenith with my business partner, Marnie, and I'll talk more about what Zenith is at the end. But through my book and in our company Zenith, it's around coaching and retreats and consulting. And so there are three things that I always talk about. So whether I'm working with young people, whether I'm inflection looking at my own life, or now when I'm coaching other people to move into some sort of entrepreneurial track, there's these three things I always come back to. The first is clarity. Like, you have to get clear on your goals. You have to know where you're headed. I think if you don't have a great planner, there's lots of really good ones. So Daniel Peck's got a good one. Don Miller from the Story Branding Guy, he has got a great tracker on how to set goals, how to move towards those goals. I always come back to, I call it Aristotle's belt and Orion's belt, that you come back to what your values are. And if anything you do, every time you wake up in the morning, you go back to those values and make sure that where you're headed is towards those things. So you're never going to be thin enough. You're never going to be, have enough money. You're never going to, be less busy. The time is now, and you need to start by first setting some goals. So the second thing I tell people is you got to engage. You got to do the work. There's an old saying, if there's 5 birds on a branch, 3 decide to fly away, how many birds are left? Still 5. Because deciding to do something and actually doing something are 2 completely different things. So you need to figure out how you're going to do the hard work. I spoke a couple years ago on the same stage as Brene Brown, and I'm just telling you, she's as cool in person as she is when you see her on Netflix or read her books. But it is the truth. You need to get in the arena, and the folks you find in the arena, those are the ones that you'll hold dear onto the things that they tell you what to do. I work right now too in the brain science space with the LEO program, which is the Life Ecology Organization. So we do a lot with the brain, and ultimately your brain needs to be uncomfortable for it to grow. Neuroplasticity happens when you're uncomfortable. And I think all of us right now, we had so much uncomfortable for a while during the pandemic. We just are feeling good with being comfortable, but we don't grow when we're comfortable. So it's really important that doing the hard work makes you uncomfortable, and it's the only way that you're going to grow. One of the things I tell folks, and one of the things that I do specifically, is if I think about, so for example, when we started Zenith, we put a whole bunch of things, because when you start a company, it's easy to just get overwhelmed and say, I'm not going to do it because there's just too much, especially these days when you have social media plans and branding and websites, and not to mention just the content that you want to do. So put it in small steps and put them in a jar. And then once a week, pull some out and say, you know what, I'm going to spend 2 hours this week just doing one of those things. So it might be watching some YouTube, videos on how to brand yourself or how to do something with social media. Just take those baby steps, and soon they will become this really big, amazing thing. And to this day, whether it was my doctorate, writing my book, or starting that business, I look back on everything I did and I was like, oh my gosh, how did I ever accomplish that? How did I even begin? But you got to begin somewhere, and you have to take those small steps. And the last tidbit that I would tell you is relationships. It is all about building that right tribe. And, you saw it probably just a few minutes ago with my good friend, Dave G. It's been wonderful to connect with him and do some things in these spaces that I've never worked in before, and really have some synergy around these cool entrepreneur ideas for students and for teachers. I also say, if, for example, when we started Zenith and we were in that consulting phase, if you want to start a business like that, like if you want to start a yoga business, you do not want 5 yoga instructors at your table. right? Because it's only going to go in that one spot. You need all sorts of different folks represented. So I would say you need a champion, someone that's really going to encourage you. You need a trailblazer. You need someone that's going to take you, that personally blazes trails, takes risks, and you learn so much from them, because that's what you need to do as an entrepreneur. You need a connector who's going to connect you with the right people, because the space I'm in right now with education and teaching and being an administrator was not going to get me into the lives of folks that were going to come to my retreats or buy my book necessarily. You need an influencer, you need those outside of your business, and you always, always, always need someone that you're mentoring. We all need those folks. And I give kudos to a lot of you on this, because a lot of you are out there trying to do that, trying to encourage folks, to your students to do some really cool, awesome things. So making sure you have those folks. I end my book with this quote, and I think it's a really important one. It says, you either walk inside your story and own it, or you stand outside your story and hustle for your worthiness. And I really think it's a great quote, especially in this space with entrepreneurship. You know, you have to just own it, own what your strengths are, and take risks around those. And that is the key to being a good entrepreneur, because you are going to fail fast. You're going to fail often. And if you can just be uncomfortable, like I said, build those neural networks in your brain, you're going to do some pretty incredible things. It's going to be hard work, but if you can get the right people around you, it's definitely worth it.